Welcome to the Sleepy Heaven, a space where we relax and explore stories woven with timeless wisdom and enduring truths. I'm your host, John, and tonight, I invite you to walk the streets of Athens, where philosophy and leadership shape the destiny of a city. In this episode, we delve into the journey of Pericles, a statesman whose vision went beyond laws and governance. He sought the true essence of freedom. Through his conversations with philosophers, citizens, and craftsmen, he uncovers a fundamental truth: happiness is bound to liberty, and liberty is forged through courage. As we follow his path, we will witness the struggles of those who hesitate at the crossroads of choice, fearing failure or the unknown. So settle in, take a deep breath, and let yourself be carried away by this tale, where the echoes of one man's words remind us that freedom is not simply granted, it must be claimed.
Close your eyes and take a slow, steady breath. Feel the air fill your lungs, bringing with it a quiet strength. As you exhale, let your mind drift to the essence of true freedom, not just the right to choose, but the courage to act upon that choice. Now, picture a moment of doubt. The farmer staring in his fields, afraid to change his ways. The young craftsman torn between passion and security. The aging citizen who fears what lies beyond life's final threshold. These are not just the dilemmas of Athens. They are the challenges that reside within every soul that longs to be free. Shift your focus to the details around you. These small moments, like choices, may seem fleeting, but together, they form the foundation of a life truly lived. Allow yourself to reflect. What chains hold you back? What fears keep you from stepping forward? Pericles taught that freedom is not passive, it is claimed by those who dare to live boldly, without allowing hesitation to take root in their hearts. So breathe deeply once more. As you exhale, let go of doubt and embrace the path ahead. The sun shone over Athens, casting elongated shadows in the agora. Pericles walked with a firm step, observing the ebb and flow of citizens. Merchants displayed their goods, artisans shaped ceramics, and citizens debated in animated groups. Athens was a prosperous city, a jewel of Hellas, and Pericles felt proud of the stability and greatness that his leadership had consolidated. However, a concern stirred in his mind. The happiness of Athens, its splendor, was it real or merely a fragile facade? Could a city be truly happy if its citizens did not understand the nature of their own freedom? With these questions in mind, he stopped at a spice stall where a merchant was animatedly discussing with an artisan. "Pericles," exclaimed the merchant upon recognizing him. "Come and judge for us. My friend here maintains that happiness comes from effort and mastery of a craft, but I say it comes from abundance and comfort." The artisan, a robust man with hands roughened by labor, nodded. "Working with my hands and seeing the fruits of my labor fills me with satisfaction. Happiness lies in a job well done." The merchant quickly replied, "That may be true for some, but tell me, isn't it better to have wealth and avoid the suffering of hard work? With money, one can buy whatever is needed without worry." Pericles smiled and took a date from a nearby tray. He rolled it between his fingers before responding, "Tell me, If a man is offered a cup of exquisite wine but is forbidden from leaving the house where he drinks it, is he free? The merchant frowned. He would not be, for his will would be limited. Then, if someone derives happiness only from wealth but their soul is not free to choose its destiny, can they truly be called happy? Pericles continued. The artisan quickly nodded, but the merchant remained thoughtful. Nearby, an elderly slave, who was slowly cleaning the ground, raised his gaze and, with a voice worn by years, said, "I have seen rich men who fear losing their fortune and artisans who enslave themselves to their own work. None of them seem happy." Pericles turned toward the old man, surprised by his words. "What is happiness to you, then?" The old man gave a faint smile. "Perhaps happiness is not in what we possess or what we do, but in our ability to choose without fear." A brief silence followed his words. The market continued its bustle, but a small group of curious onlookers had gathered around Pericles. A young scribe, who had been taking notes on the exchanges in the agora, cautiously approached. "Great Pericles, if happiness lies in the ability to choose without fear, how can we know if we are truly choosing freely?" he asked. The Athenian leader observed the young man with interest and responded with another question. "What do you fear more, making a mistake in a decision or having someone else make it for you?" The scribe pondered the question. After a moment, he answered, "I suppose the latter. If I fail, at least it was my choice." Pericles nodded solemnly. "Then happiness not only lies in being able to choose, but in having the courage to assume the consequences of that choice. Without that courage, freedom is just an illusion." The artisan and the merchant exchanged glances. Even the old slave seemed surprised by the response. The scribe bowed his head in respect. That night, in his home, Pericles reflected on the conversation. He recalled other discussions he had heard in the assembly. Some said that happiness was living without worries, without danger. Others argued that it was found in the respect of others. However, he thought that the real question lay in the choice itself, not in avoiding difficulties, but in facing them with determination. He stood and walked to his desk, where he took a parchment and began writing notes on what had been discussed. He needed to speak with his philosopher friends, with minds that could challenge him even further. The reflection had only just begun, and he would not rest until he reached the root of the matter. The next day, as the sun rose over the city, Pericles decided to visit the temples and academies of Athens. He knew that within their walls, he would find deep debates about human nature and the true essence of freedom. Inside him, a certainty began to take shape. Happiness was more than a fleeting sensation, more than the security of wealth or the satisfaction of duty fulfilled. It was a state of realization that could only be reached when one dared to live fully, without fears that restricted the spirit. He knew he would convene a symposium in the coming days. There, he hoped to find answers to his concerns and perhaps redefine what it meant to live in freedom. The search for truth had only just begun. The symposium hall was illuminated by the soft glow of oil lamps, casting flickering shadows on the marble walls. Pericles had invited a select group of philosophers, playwrights, and statesmen to discuss a topic that had been troubling him deeply: the true nature of freedom. Among the guests were Anaxagoras, the renowned philosopher, Sophocles, the celebrated tragedian, and a young Socrates, whose inquisitive mind had already earned him a reputation in Athens. The gathering had just begun when Anaxagoras took the floor. Freedom, my friends, is the ability to act according to reason. A man ruled by passions is no freer than a ship tossed by the storm. True freedom is attained through knowledge and understanding. Sophocles, seated comfortably, interjected with a smile. Yet, Anaxagoras, the great tragedies show us that even the wisest men fall victim to fate. Can one claim to be free when destiny weaves an inescapable web? Pericles leaned forward, his gaze steady. And yet, are we not bound by our responsibilities? A citizen of Athens enjoys freedom, but only within the framework of the laws that sustain our democracy. Would we call a man free if he lives without order, guided only by impulse? Socrates, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. But what are the choices we make? If a man follows the law out of fear rather than conviction, is he truly free? Does not real freedom stem from the courage to seek truth regardless of consequences? A thoughtful silence filled the hall. The debate had reached a crucial point. Could freedom exist without courage? Was it merely an external condition granted by society, or did it require an internal strength to be fully realized? Pericles turned to his guests. Let us consider the citizen who avoids public duty out of fear of failure. He may live without external constraint, yet is he not enslaved by his own doubts? Likewise, the man who hesitates to pursue his passion, choosing instead a life of comfort, does he not surrender his freedom in the face of security? Sophocles nodded. Tragic heroes often fall because they cannot reconcile their desires with their obligations. Perhaps true freedom lies in accepting both responsibility and risk. Anaxagoras added, "Indeed, freedom is not the absence of limits, but the wisdom to navigate them." Socrates, with a gleam in his eyes, concluded, "Then we return to courage. To be free is not merely to have choices, but to have the fortitude to make them without fear." Pericles sat back, a sense of clarity settling within him. The conversation had reinforced what he had begun to suspect. Freedom was not simply a matter of external conditions, but of inner resolve. Without courage, freedom was nothing more than a hollow concept. The discussion continued late into the night, but for Pericles, a conclusion had begun to take shape. He would ensure that the people of Athens understood this truth: happiness lay in freedom, but freedom required courage. As the lamps burned lower, a servant entered with more wine, refilling the cups of the attendees. The atmosphere was charged with contemplation as each man mulled over the ideas exchanged. Sophocles broke the silence, his voice softer this time. "Pericles, you speak of courage. But is courage something innate, or is it something cultivated? Can a man learn to be brave? Pericles considered this. Courage, like wisdom, can be nurtured. A man may be fearful, but if he pushes himself beyond that fear, if he refuses to be governed by it, does he not forge his own courage? Socrates smiled. Then courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. A man who never faces danger does not need courage. It is only in adversity that freedom and bravery are tested. Anaxagoras leaned forward, intrigued. And yet, if one chooses not to act, if one allows fear to dictate their path, they are already enslaved. Freedom, therefore, is not just the ability to choose, but the will to act upon it. The discussion stretched into the early hours of the morning, each thought building upon the last. As dawn neared, Pericles stood, signaling the end of the gathering. He looked around at his companions and spoke one final time. Let us remember this night. We have uncovered a truth that Athens must hear. Freedom is not granted, nor is it passive. It must be lived, shaped by the courage to make choices, to risk failure, and to act despite fear. Only then can one be truly free. With that, the symposium concluded, and the men dispersed, carrying with them the weight of their discourse, ready to bring these revelations to the heart of the city. The morning sun bathed Athens in a golden glow as Pericles walked through a quiet residential district. The conversations of the previous night still echoed in his mind. He had explored the essence of freedom with the wisest men of the city, yet he felt that true understanding required observation of the common citizen. The ideals of philosophers held great value, but how did they manifest in the daily struggles of the people? His first stop was the home of Demes, an elderly farmer known for his diligence. Pericles found him inspecting his fields, his brow furrowed in thought. Demes, my friend, I see a concern upon you. Has the harvest been unkind? Pericles asked. Demes shook his head. No, Pericles, the crops grow well. But my sons urge me to adopt new techniques, methods that promise greater yield. I have tilled this land as my father did before me. What if these innovations bring ruin instead of prosperity? Pericles considered his words. Change always bears risk, but is it not true that without courage, we remain stagnant? Your fear of failure binds you as surely as chains would. Perhaps freedom is not merely the right to choose, but the will to embrace the unknown. Demes sighed, nodding slowly. You speak wisely, Pericles. I must consider this not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Leading Demes to his thoughts, Pericles continued his walk and soon encountered Philemon, a young man sitting before a modest workshop. He was surrounded by finely crafted sandals, yet his expression was one of uncertainty. Philemon, why do you sit so restless before such excellent craftsmanship? Pericles inquired. The young man hesitated before answering. I have learned two trades, cobbling, which I love, and accounting, which my father insists will bring wealth. My heart yearns for one, my mind warns me of the other. Which path is truly free? Pericles smiled. Is freedom found in safety or fulfillment? Wealth may ease burdens, but will it satisfy the soul? If your heart longs for creation, will you not feel imprisoned behind ledgers? True freedom is not found in avoiding hardship, but in choosing the road that calls to us despite it. Philemon exhaled deeply, a sense of clarity dawning upon him. Perhaps I have known the answer all along, but lacked the courage to accept it. As Pericles continued his journey, he reached the shaded porch of Lysander, an aging citizen who sat in silent contemplation. His once strong hand trembled slightly as he gestured for Pericles to join him. "Tell me, Lysander, what weighs upon you today?" Pericles asked, his voice gentle. Lysander sighed. "My years grow short, and I find myself fearing what lies beyond. I have led a good life, yet the unknown grips my heart with unease." Pericles regarded him thoughtfully. "The greatest freedom, Lysander, is to live without fear, even in the face of death. It is not the end itself we fear, but the regret of an unlived life. Have you lived fully, loved, and contributed to this city? Then you have no chains left to break." Lysander nodded, a peaceful understanding settling upon him. "Perhaps you are right. Fear is but a shadow, and I have let it loom too large." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Pericles reflected on the day's encounters. He had sought wisdom in the grand halls of Athens, but it was here, in the struggles of its people, that he had seen the deepest truths of freedom. Fear of change, fear of choice, and fear of the unknown bound men more surely than any external force. He paused by the edge of the agora, watching as merchants packed their stalls and citizens returned home. A group of young men engaged in a spirited debate near the fountain, discussing matters of state and ambition. He approached and listened. One of them, Callimachus, turned to Pericles. "Great Pericles, does freedom mean casting aside caution entirely?" Pericles smiled. "Not at all, Callimachus. Freedom is not recklessness. It is the ability to choose, informed by wisdom, unburdened by unnecessary fear. True freedom is knowing the risks yet choosing boldly regardless." Callimachus pondered this, and the others nodded in agreement. Pericles continued, "We fear responsibility because it demands something of us. But if we reject it, we remain stagnant. The courage to act, despite uncertainty, is the true measure of a free man." As he walked back toward the heart of the city, he resolved that his next address to the assembly would not merely speak of laws and governance, but of the unseen chains that kept citizens from embracing their full potential. Freedom was not merely granted, it was seized by those who had the courage to claim it. The great hall of the Athenian assembly was filled with murmurs as citizens gathered to hear Pericles speak. The echoes of past discussions still lingered in his mind, the fears of the farmer, the doubts of the young craftsman, and the weight of age upon the elder. Today, he would address them all with one final truth, the inseparable bond between happiness, freedom, and courage. Stepping onto the platform, Pericles raised his hand for silence. Athenians, we pride ourselves on our democracy, our intellect, and our strength. Yet, tell me, how many of us live truly free? A silence settled upon the room. He continued, I have walked among you, listened to your worries, and observed the fears that bind you. Some of you fear change, clinging to old ways lest the unknown bring ruin. Others stand at crossroads, afraid to choose lest they lose what comfort they have. And some among us, in the final years of life, fear what awaits beyond the mortal veil. He let his words sink in before speaking again. But I tell you now, happiness is found in freedom, and freedom in courage. It is not merely our right to choose, but our duty to face uncertainty with strength. What is life if it is lived in fear? If a man refuses to take the path he desires because it is difficult, is he not already a slave to his doubts? If a city avoids bold action for fear of loss, does it not slowly decay? Among the crowd, a young man stood. Pericles, is it not wisdom to avoid risk? Should we not be cautious with our choices? Pericles smiled. Wisdom is not the absence of action, but the balance of caution and bravery. A man who does not leap blindly into danger is wise, but a man who refuses to act at all is a prisoner of his own hesitation. An older man, nodding thoughtfully, spoke up. You speak of courage, but how does one cultivate it? Not all men are born brave. True, Pericles admitted. But courage is not an innate gift. It is forged in choice, in action. A man becomes courageous by standing firm against his fears, by choosing resolve over retreat. The more one acts, the stronger his spirit grows. Just as the body is strengthened through labor, so too is the soul fortified by brave decisions. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. Pericles pressed on, and so I tell you, Athenians, do not let the grass grow upon the path of friendship, upon the road of ambition, upon the pursuit of truth. Fear stagnates the soul, and in stagnation, freedom dies. The assembly hall fell into silence, each citizen reflecting on the weight of his words. Then, as if struck by a common realization, applause erupted. They had come not only to listen, but to understand. That evening, as Pericles walked through the dimly lit streets of Athens, he knew that the lesson had been learned. Freedom was not merely an idea, it was a challenge, a duty, a path that required constant courage. And for those who dared to walk it, happiness would surely follow. As he made his way through the agora, he overheard a group of men still engaged in discussion, their words animated with newfound inspiration. One of them, a merchant, spoke to his companion. Perhaps it is time to take the risk we have long feared. The route to Miletus is uncertain, but the trade it offers could bring prosperity. Have we not lived too long avoiding what might bring us greatness? His friend nodded, determination lighting his face. Indeed, Pericles is right. We hold ourselves back not with chains, but with hesitation. Let us act. Pericles paused, allowing himself a brief smile. This was the true power of words, of philosophy turned into action. It was not in great monuments or victories in battle that the strength of a city was measured, but in the choices of its people. As he reached his home, he looked up at the Acropolis, its columns bathed in moonlight. Tomorrow would bring new debates, new struggles. But tonight, Athens had been reminded of its greatest treasure, the courage to embrace freedom. He lingered for a moment, thinking of the countless generations who would walk these streets long after he was gone. Would they carry forward the ideals of freedom, or would fear once again tighten its grip on their souls? The answer, he knew, lay not in speeches, nor in laws, but in the hearts of those willing to act. Only by continuing to choose courage, day after day, would Athens remain truly free.